The throne room smelled of cold iron and oil, and the 1,000 blades of Aegon's chair threw hard light across the polished floor in a lattice of shadows like bars. Ned Stark stood beneath those broken swords with the old book of lineages in his hand. Ink had seeped into his fingers over the last days, as if the matter had stained him through. He felt the weight of it more keenly than steel. Between every slow heartbeat, the words came back the way a prayer returned. The seed is strong. The dead had left him that proof. Jon Arryn, bent over this very binding, had died to learn it. Now Ned would speak it aloud where it ought to be spoken, in front of the realm. Lords assembled like a forest of banners turned to faces. Small folk packed the backs of the hall, pressed behind the gold cloaks. Ser Boros Blunt stood on the steps to the throne, lip wet with a shine of sweat. Ser Meryn Trant loomed with his small, bored eyes, a half-pace too near Sansa, who'd been led forward with other noble children to witness the proclamation. Sandor Clegane rested one mailed hand on the pommel of a sword that seemed almost too small for him. Grand Maester Pycelle clutched his chain and peered down his nose at the pages Ned held, as if poor eyesight could excuse old cowardice. Varys's hands were folded in the wide sleeves of his rose silk. Peter Baelish smiled without smiling. Janos Slynt had posted his men thick along the walls. Even their armor seemed to be holding its breath. Cersei was all pale gold and green, a summer storm in silk. She dressed Joffrey in crimson and polished steel as if anointing a weapon. The boy was thin where Robert had been broad, sharp where Robert had been square. Yet it was not the color nor the cut that betrayed him to Ned Stark's eye. It was the way the light slid off him without catching on a single honest edge. Tommen and Myrcella hung back, confused, their hands white on each other's fingers. For them Ned felt a pain as real as any knife. "Lord Stark," Cersei said, her smile slender as a needle. "We are gathered to honor the will of the late king. Speak and be done." The boy tires. Joffrey shifted on the iron throne, its jagged arms dwarfing him until he seemed a pale and angry child climbing a sword pile. "I am not tired. Say it, Stark. Kneel and say it." A murmur ran the room. Every man there heard the sharpness in the boy's voice, the way cruelty came to him too easily and respect not at all. Ned had known bold princes before. Boldness could be shaped. Malice was the rot that spread from the core outward. He raised the parchment Robert had sealed with his name and ring. Each step up the dais felt like crossing some winter stream on stones too far apart. There was no sure footing except to place one foot and then the next. The Kingsguard watched him, the Queen watched him, and 1,000 others watched him while he climbed. "By command of King Robert," he said, letting his voice fill the hall, "I was named protector of the realm until the king's heir should come of age. I do not seek crowns. I have never sought them, but the realm will have the truth." Joffrey laughed too loudly, and the hound's mouth bent into something like pity and something like waiting. Cersei's hand went to the boy's forearm in the smallest of movements, restraining him not out of love but out of calculation. "The truth," Cersei echoed. "What courage it takes to promise the truth only after the lion is made to stand without his king." A stir along one side of the hall, a whisper of names like dry leaves. Renly Baratheon had fled the night before, and the absence of his green cloak was a hole where one expected color. Tywin Lannister was not present, yet his shape could be felt as surely as if he sat on a second throne carved of ledger stones and debts. Ned held up the book. The spine creaked like an old knee. "The truth is written where any man may read it, if he has eyes and will." The Baratheon line, from Orys Baratheon, bastard of Aegon the Conqueror's line, through the Storm Lords who followed, to Lord Steffan and his sons. Black of hair, black of hair, black of hair. The seed is strong. He turned the pages, the sound of paper soft and deadly. Lords of Storm's End took wives with hair the color of wheat and flame and snow, but their sons bore the father's iron. The seed is strong. He closed the book and let the sound carry. Robert claimed children fair as spring wheat and summer hay. Yet his bastards, whom I have seen with my own eyes, are black of hair, black of eye. Bastards! Joffrey snapped, half rising, high color flashing in his cheeks. "I am no bastard." Cersei's smile did not waver. Madness. The grief has unseated him. How cruel to make him babble before the whole court. Barristan Selmy stepped forward one pace, slow and deliberate, the movement of an old oak bending to wind but not surrendering its ground. "Lord Stark, speak what you intend to speak. All of it. I will hear it, and if it be treason, I will hear that too." Ned met the old knight's eyes, and they were not the eyes of a man who had loved Robert only because he must. There was a steadiness there, and a sorrow older than any one king. "I intend to say," Ned Stark said, "what Lord John Arryn bled to learn, that these children are not of King Robert's body." Silence fell. Even the hissing of torches seemed to fade until the only sounds were a sandal scuff far back and the faint clink of a chain from the maester's chest. Cersei's hand tightened where it lay on the arm of the throne. There was no flicker of guilt or surprise in her. Pride only, and a flash of rage like sunlight on a drawn blade. "Lies," she said. She did not look at Joffrey. She did not need to. You take a book and make a gallows from it. There is no proof but mud and malice. "Proof," Ned answered, calm as he could make himself be, "may be measured by more than ink. Your brother bears the look of you as a mirror would, as do your children. It is not mud I throw. It is a stone, and it will break what it must." King Robert's squire served him with sweet wines on the hunt. "The wines came from your father's casks. The boar killed the king, and he died without seeing this day. Perhaps it would have gone differently had he lived, but he did not. Now law must live where Robert cannot." Peter's voice slipped between them like a silver fish. "And yet, my lord, a court loves more than law. It loves spectacle." His eyes flicked to where the small folk strained to catch each word. "What is a boy to do, accused before the realm by a grieving northerner? The tale will travel fast. I suppose we had best make certain it is the tale you mean to tell." "Enough," Cersei said. "Seize him." She had timed it for the instant when the hall hung between breath and breath. Janos Slint barked his order and gold cloaks peeled from the wall like a falling curtain. The Kingsguard shifted, loyal to a point, to a name, to a boy on a chair made of knives. The hound's sword whispered free. Ned had known this might come. He had not come unprepared, but his preparations were of a northern kind, made of paper and honor and the old friendship of a dead king. His men were there, Tomard and Varley and the rest in plain boiled leather. They took a step forward and no more. When steel rang on stone, it sounded like winter breaking. Then Barristan Selmy did a thing that would be told in quiet voices over cups for 100 years. He stood between the hand and the gold cloaks and lifted a hand that held no sword. "No one draws blood in the throne room without the king's word," he said. "And if the boy on that chair is no king, there is no word here to obey. Lower your blades." The hound's teeth showed in a grin like a cut. "Old man, you'll take a scratch that will end you." "Perhaps," Selmy said, and there was the least ghost of a smile at the corners of his eyes. "But you will make it on my terms, or not at all." Janos Slint hesitated, and in that heartbeat 100 loyalties ran through 100 heads. Varys inclined his head a fraction toward Slint, and the watch commander caught the movement and mistook it for support. Peter Baelish's fingers played on the hilt of a dagger, as if it were a harp string that would sound sweetest in a storm. Pycelle seemed to shrink into his maester's chain, each link a weight drawing him toward whatever man looked strongest at the moment of choosing. Cersei spoke again, soft and cutting. "If you love the slain king, Ser Barristan, do not grant treason the shelter of your age. Arrest Lord Stark and break his pretty book for kindling." "I served a king," Barristan said, eyes on Ned, voice for everyone. "Not lies. If there is doubt, make a council, stand a great lord to each measure and weigh it. If there is none, then a queen asks men to swear to a false oath. I might die for an oath I chose. I will not kill for one forced down my throat." The hound took a step and met a northern sword with a ring that shivered air. Tomard staggered and came again, stubborn as a mountain. Ser Meryn moved to take Ned at the shoulder and found himself staring at a point of steel that had not been there a breath before. It was not barrack steel. It was the long, dark blade of ice, strapped on Ned as if he'd put on Winterfell itself for a cloak. He did not lift it high. He did not need to. He laid its weight across the space between himself and the throne, a silent bar of judgment. "Janos," Varys said, as if he were calling to a child on a wall about to fall. "You are Lord Commander of the City Watch. The Watch serves the city. You are no Lannister men-at-arms to be traded at a table. Look at the hall. If blood is spilled here today, it will wash you away with all the rest. Let the hand speak what he came to speak. Then choose where honor points, not coin." Slint's face was a study in conflict. He had been promised, bought, perhaps twice over. But he did not like dying. And he liked less the way the crowd had turned its attention from the queen to him, as if he were a dog that might bite its master or slink. He spat on the floor and waved a hand. "Hold," he said savagely. "On your points. All on your points." The hall breathed again. Ned felt the book's corners bite against his palm like 4 small teeth. He stepped 1 pace closer to the throne and let the words come, steady and plain as snowfall. "I say this before gods and men. Joffrey Baratheon is not of Robert's blood. Tommen and Myrcella are not of Robert's blood. Their true father is Ser Jaime of House Lannister." Someone cried out, a woman's voice from the back, and the small folks' murmur rose like bees boiled out of a hive. Myrcella's fingers slipped from Tommen's. The boy looked at his mother with frightened adoration which made Ned ache. Joffrey's face went as still as a mask and then shattered, fury rushing through it until he was only the fury. "You'll die for that," the boy whispered. "I'll have your head on a spike." "Quiet," Cersei said, and it was the first word she had spoken that sounded like a mother's word. She stepped down 3 iron steps and faced Ned. Close now, close enough for him to smell the orange oil in her hair. Up close her beauty had a brittle sheen, like glass at the moment before it cracked. "You think the truth wins war. It does not. Swords and gold win war. And you, my lord, have brought a book to a sword fight." Ned lowered ice. The Kingsguard tensed, then eased. He did not look away from Cersei. "The North remembers," he said softly. "And the realm is not only your father's gold. The realm is men like Barristan Selmy, who know what honor is. It is men who will not swear to a lie even if you wrap it in velvet. It is lords who know the law and peasants who know when a thing is crooked. The realm is also children, and I will not play your cruelty with them." Cersei's gaze flicked past him to her daughter and younger son. A flash of calculation hardened into resolve. She lifted her chin. "I ask again, will no man take this traitor?" "I will," came a voice, and it was not the hound, not Slint, not a courtier who had always dreamt of such a line. It was Ser Boros, red-faced and sweating, who wanted to please whatever power was nearest. He lumbered forward, sword raised. Barristan's blade leapt free, bright as a winter morning. He did not hack. He placed himself between the clumsy violence and its object with the minimal movement required to deny the world what it wanted. Their swords met once, twice. Boros stumbled back. The old knight did not press. He only gave the man a look that a father might give a son found beating a dog. Boros lowered his blade without quite understanding why he had done it. "Enough," Barristan said, now to all of them, now to history. "By the will naming Lord Eddard Stark, protector of the realm, we will convene a great council of the lords present and the small council. We will send for Lord Stannis Baratheon and Lord Renley Baratheon. We will hold the queen and her children in honor until the matter is judged." Cersei laughed, and the sound was so wrong in the echoing room that even some of her own men flinched. "Hold me in honor," she said. "You think you can bind a lion with garlands? Try. See what teeth do to flowers." But even she could see the balance had shifted. She could not conjure a king from air. With Barristan's pronouncement, the hall had been given a pause where only frenzy had been. In that pause, Varys's soft voice, Peter's mild eyes, Pycelle's bustling pomposity. All these found no purchase because the old knight had spoken in the grammar of steel that all men understood. Ned gave a single nod. Ser Barristan, I claim your safeguard for the queen and her children. No harm to them, no insult, no deprivation. They will keep their chambers and their clothes and their dignity until the lords decide. I will sign no writ that makes orphans to satisfy a matter of right. Barristan inclined his head. As you say, my lord protector. Janos Slint's mouth worked. He wanted to assert himself and did not know how. He threw a brittle glance at Baelish, but Peter gazed at his fingernails. The watch commander gestured roughly to his men. Stand easy, he snapped, as if he had intended all along to give that order. The assembly broke like ice into smaller shards. Quiet erupted into 100 conversations that were not quiet at all. The small folk in back remained craned forward, their faces fixed in the peculiar hope and hunger of those who had no vote but would pay for the outcome whichever way it fell. Sansa looked at Ned with eyes he had last seen when she was a little girl who had dropped a cake and feared a scold. She moved toward him before Ser Meryn, stung by humiliation, stepped half sideways, blocking her. The angle was slight and deliberate. Somehow that pricked Ned worse than shouted threats. Before he could speak, Sandor Clegane reached out and put 2 fingers on Meryn Trant's breastplate. Just a touch, as if he were thinking to flick away a fly. Meryn shuffled a half step aside, as if compelled by some old childhood memory of a bigger boy in a yard. The hound did not look at Ned or at Sansa. He looked up at the throne, his mouth twisted. You heard him, boy, Sandor said to Joffrey in a voice pitched for the space between them. You're to be safe and honored until the lords quarrel. I am the king, Joffrey hissed. I command. Command in a whisper, the hound advised, almost gently. Else men will hear how young you are. Joffrey flushed again, and anger bulged in him with nowhere to go. Cersei's touch steadied him. We withdraw, she pronounced. The lion does not claw at every provocation. He chooses the throat. The children and the queen moved together then. A bright knot of color and danger watched by every eye. The king's guard flanked them. Gold cloaks formed a corridor. The doors boomed closed after them, and the sound passed through the vast space as a long, low roll of thunder. What followed had little of thunder in it and much of hard, dull work. The great lords called for parchment and messengers. The small council snapped into the semblance of purpose that bureaucracy always finds when truth threatens to interfere. Varys slipped away and reappeared as if he had never left. Peter was all helpful grace, summoning clerks and procuring a seal that matched Robert's. Pycelle huffed about precedent and pulled 3 dusty scrolls that no one needed from a chest. Janos Slint refilled his mouth with bluster and his hands with orders, and the watch looked to him with their weary loyalty. By the time the sun tilted toward afternoon, ravens beat upward from the rookery in a black scatter, each bearing a message that weighed more than its own small bones. Ned signed the letters with careful strokes and paused over each name. To Stannis Baratheon at Dragonstone. Plain as law, direct as winter, calling him to the city under the protection of his dead brother's friend and his dead brother's own old sword. To Renley at High Garden. Respectful but firm, setting forth the claim and inviting him to be a part of its judgment. To the great houses, to Old Town, to the Vale and the Riverlands and the Reach, to Storm's End and White Harbor. The language altered in minor ways, but the matter was one. Come, si. Stand for the realm's peace by standing for what is true. When he laid the quill down, the bones of his hand ached. He flexed the fingers until the ache smoothed. In the quiet between one intrusion and the next, a thought came, and it bore Syrio Farrell's pale, fierce face like a shadow behind it. Arya. He had sent Jory to fetch both his girls that morning, and Jory was dead. He had sent new men in Jory's place. He had promised himself to keep the throne room from turning to blood. But the Red Keep was more than one room. He found Arya in a gallery overlooking the Maidenvault yard, black hair tangled, cheeks grime-streaked and shining with drying tears, Syrio Farrell beside her, unarmed and bright-eyed, which amounted to the same as being armed. I told them, Arya said before Ned could speak, I told them we would go with your men. But then the fat one with the pudding face, Ser Marin, he came with more of his friends. Syrio said we would take a different path. He fought them with a stick. She swallowed. He beat them. Syrio bowed a small bow that was all flourish and yet also nothing more than a nod. They come with many swords and no dancing, the Bravosi said, as if continuing a thought from minutes ago. The little cat and I, we go where men do not think. We go through the kitchens. We go along a roof where a cook throws a pot. Splat, it is like summer rain. The other men your lord sent met us, and the cook swore, and we laughed, and then we did not laugh, because some Lannister men were at the next turn. But the little cat she bit like a cat, and we ran like mice. Ned closed his eyes and let his breath out, and in that breath was thanks as pious as any prayer. He put his hand on Arya's head. She did not shrink. She did not lean in. She looked up, fierce and uncertain. She was his entirely. "Thank you," he said to Syrio. The dancing master gave a wider bow. "I have little to buy here but pride. I chose to spend it." In the following days, the city learned new ways to whisper. The tale went out like smoke and came back like soot. The baker cried that the king was not the king, and the city watch clapped him on the ear and told him to watch his dough. In the street of steel, a boy with black hair and blue eyes lifted a hammer and discovered that men looked at him suddenly with wondering stares. Gendry, Ned thought, and sent a quiet word to the armorer to keep the boy close and away from men with too many questions. Waterside a whore held a baby with dark fuzz atop her head and made the sign of the 7 4 times over, quick and fearful, and Ned made sure a coin reached her that bore a dire wolf and not a lion. The Red Keep held the Lannisters politely confined, and the Lannisters held themselves like people who believed that walls were only waiting for them to speak their true shape and become doors. Sansa came to him the second evening, plain as a petition and trembling, and when she spoke it was not of Joffrey's hair nor of her planned children with golden curls. "I wrote to the queen," she confessed, voice small. "I begged her to let me stay and marry. I thought, if she were kind to me, she would be a good mother to me and I could make peace." Ned felt the weight of years lean across both their shoulders. "It is not a sin to wish for peace," he said. He could not tell her that such wishes often made ladders for crueler men to climb. He put his hands around hers. "You will remain safe with me. I have promised that, and I will keep what I promise. The queen will be treated with honor, and you will never be made to see what you should not." Sansa's eyes filled and did not spill. "He called me stupid when I said I was sure of him," she whispered with a child's ruthlessness for repeating the exact word that had cut her. "Joffrey, he said it where no one could hear, but he said it. It was before, when you were ill luck with the boar and everything was wrong. I did not think of it then." She lifted her head. "Is Arya safe?" "She is," Ned said, and the ease that breathed out of Sansa was like the first warmth in spring after a long winter that had taught you to mistrust warmth. She went to sleep that night in the Queen's old solar, which smelled faintly of oranges and something harder beneath, and dreamed of snow that did not melt. Peter Baelish tried 3 times in 3 days to corner Ned Stark where men could not hear or could plausibly claim not to have heard. Twice Ned denied him the angle by refusing to stand still with any man who wore a hidden smile like a second mouth in his cheek. The 3rd time came in the godswood, where the red leaves hung motionless and the weirwood face peered down with tired, patient judgment. "You have done a dangerous thing tidily," Peter observed from a respectful pace behind the bench where Ned sat. He did not come closer. The godswood had its own rules, even for men who did not believe in them. "It is something to see. I half expected a chaos of the entertaining sort." Ned did not turn. "You have enjoyed enough chaos to last 3 lifetimes." "Oh, never," Peter said lightly. "I find it renews the blood. But this is a subtler brew. Ser Barristan has given you a wall you did not have. A wall of eyes and common sense. Even the gold cloaks like him more than they like dying for a queen they suspect is writing a lie. I had almost thought to see you dead beneath the throne. It would have been poetic in a way. The Northmen killed by the chair built of Southron swords." Ned turned his head then. "Was that the plan you backed?" "The plan I backed," Peter said, and his smile was a magnanimous thing. as if he conceded to Ned a point of cleverness in remembering that plans had backers. Was the one that kept me alive and left my enemies guessing whether I had betrayed them. I must say, Lord Stark, you have complicated the board. Cersei cannot flee without an admission. Joffrey cannot punish without making sport of the old knight's honor. Stannis will come because you have made it safe to come. Renley will not come because it will not be fun to come. The lion in the west will move because he is a lion and does not understand not moving. You have made a war, my lord. A tidy one, perhaps, but a war nonetheless. Ned looked back at the carved face, at its smooth-combed hair of red leaves, at the eyes like deep scars. I did not make Tywin Lannister raise his banners. He had men in the field before Robert died. Yes, Peter allowed. He smelled blood as wolves do, but I would not call the Queen's father a wolf to his face. It would only make him think of the skins he prefers to wear. He paused. The leaves did not stir. Stannis is a hard man. He will have a hard justice. The realm may not love him when he is king. Do you? I love the law, Ned said. I love that what is right no matter who says otherwise. I do not love Stannis. I do not need to. He is the king by rights. I used to think, Peter mused, that rights were like coins. You could pass them along and end up richer. Then I saw that in the end, the richest man holds them all and the rest find they were only tokens. Take care you do not bruise your fingers clutching them. When Peter had gone, the quiet in the godswood felt like the space between the beat of a heart, and Ned remembered how the face carved into the Winterfell weirwood had looked under snow with the raven's black against the white. He wondered what Robb was doing, whether Catelyn had found warmth by a fire or only the hard heat of worry. He sent a raven to Winterfell with words not clever and not new and sufficient. On the 5th morning, the bells of the Great September tolled for a council by the will of the Protector and rang for so long that even the doves nesting in the cornices of the sept shuddered and lifted and circled, confused. The lords who were in the city came with their retinues, and the priests came in their 7-colored robes, and the small folk came in rags and hopes. The queen did not come, but she sent the children with their hair brushed until it shone. The king's guard placed themselves behind and beside them like pieces arranged with care on a Sivas board that still believed itself to be a chessboard. The council sat, and Ser Barristan presided as if he had sat on councils all his life. He did not have the fine words of the maesters nor the sly ones of the Southron courtiers, but the room bent toward him as tall grasses bend toward true wind. Witnesses were called. A midwife from a distant year and a nearer childbed. A groom who remembered a bed left unrumpled at dawn too many times for a healthy marriage. A squire with a boy's battered pride telling how Uncle Jamie had favored him too well. The captain of a ship that had taken a lady and her brother on a silent sail and brought them home at dawn. Ned watched the faces of the lords as the thread of proof was pulled through the fabric of the story. It was not one piece of hard iron. It was 1,000 small stitches that, when drawn together, made a seam that would not give. Pycelle coughed and objected to hearsay and precedent and decency until even decency turned away from him in embarrassment. Varys spoke rarely and only to lay a piece gently that made the pattern more evident. Peter did not speak at all. He watched. Joffrey sat rigid, eyes moving from voice to voice without catching on any. Tommen blinked and rubbed his nose when he thought no one saw. Myrcella kept her eyes lowered and did not cry, which should have made her braver than the room deserved. At last the lords were asked, one by one, to say whether they believed what had been laid out. One by one they said it, some slowly, as if pulling the words from their throats like thorns, some quickly as if to be done with it. A very few, in voices that did not tremble, embraced it as if relieved to have something solid underfoot after days of mud. When the last voice fell, the quiet was not charged this time. It was exhausted. By the testimony and by the law, Barristan said. The boy Joffrey Baratheon is not a trueborn son of Robert, nor is Tommen, nor is Myrcella. The crown passes, by right and by the late kings will naming the Protector to guard the realm until the rightful heir be confirmed, to Lord Stannis Baratheon of Dragonstone. This is what the law says. It is not kind. It is not unkind. It is the law. Joffrey stood. He was shaking with fury and humiliation, and at that instant he looked very young indeed. "I will kill you all," he whispered, so low that only the first row of lords heard it, and in their faces was a quick, flickering fear that they did not want to own. "I will have your tongues for this. I am the king. You will be treated with all honor," Ned said, pitching his voice so that it covered the whisper and made speech decent again. "No harm will come to you or to your brother or to your sister. The queen will remain in comfort. No man will insult her. You will be guests until the rightful king comes to the city. That is my word. The North keeps its words." Cersei said nothing at all. She placed her hand on Joffrey's arm again, and the boy sank down like a puppet that had had its strings pulled taut. If there was triumph in her, she hid it better than Ned had thought she could. If there was fear, it was the kind she would not let herself name. Not fear for her life, nor even for her children's lives, but fear that the story she had made and lived within might be told in new words from here on. The war did not pause to listen to bells. In the Riverlands, men burned other men's wheat and drove lowing cattle in crooked lines that would never return where they should. Tywin Lannister sent banners across the Trident like red-tasseled spears, and with them Tyrion came, wary and quick-eyed, with mountain clans loping along at his heels. He was the only Lannister who wrote Ned a letter and had it delivered without insult or bribe, the only one who asked for parley that did not taste of bait. When they met in a hall in the ruins of an old inn near the crossroads, a storm hammered the roof until the words had to be thrown to cross the space between them. "My nephew is no king," Tyrion said without preamble, tugging at his doublet, which sat askew on his narrow shoulders. "You have said so, and the lords have said so, and soon enough my brother and sister will say so to one another with steel. I do not contest the law, but forgive me if I contest the reality of holding my sweet sister peacefully while you await Stannis." "I told you the queen was safe," Ned said. "Safe," Tyrion repeated. "A marvelous word. Sounds like a thick blanket on a cold night. It almost makes up for the fact that my father is sharpening his quills and his axes at the same time. He will not accept your tidy counsel's tidy verdict. He will accept gold, or blood, or the rare coin that has both faces. Does this parley come with one of those?" "It comes with an offer," Tyrion said, and though he smiled, his eyes were sober in a way that reminded Ned suddenly and sharply of men he'd liked under Robb's tutelage in the yard who smiled until the moment they did not. "Let the children leave the city with me. All three. Let me take them to Casterly Rock. Let the queen come too if you like. Call them hostages if it makes you feel virtuous. But let me get them out from beneath the knives of a dozen futures where they die in a satisfying way." Ned stared at him. "You would take them to your father. Who will do what with them?" "Protect them," Tyrion said. "Not out of goodness, out of pride. He understands only two kinds of loss, gold and name. Children are both, in a manner of speaking. He will not slit his own throat to spite you with a little blood. He might consider striking bargains. If you send them to the September and make a spectacle of mercy, he will send men to drag them out by their hair. If you send them to me, he will be furious and checkmated and therefore, regrettably, reasonable." Ned did not reply at once. Rain crashed and then slackened and then crashed again, and somewhere in the breaks a horse stamped and blew. He thought of Myrcella's careful hands, of Tommen's snuffling, of Joffrey's brittle voice that had learned cruelty before it learned patience. He thought of the city, of Stannis' slow, hard mercy and Renly's quick, bright refusal to bend. He thought of Tywin Lannister, who would not bend either, and of the realm stuck between them like a child between arguing parents, learning only to flinch. "I gave my word," he said at last. "They are safe in the city. If I send them with you, it will be said that I feared to keep them safe." Tyrion tilted his head. "It will also be said that you are less stupid than you seem. Those stories may both be true. Do you care which is told more loudly?" Ned's hand went to the old ache above his knee, the place where a wound sometimes woke in wet weather as if the blade had just slid in. "I care what is right." "Of course you do," Tyrion said. "You have made it very difficult to buy you, Lord Stark. You are ruining a profession. What does your father offer in return? Peace if he can have it, Tyrion said with unusual frankness. A war on terms if he cannot, and the knowledge that the children will not be paraded or punished for their mother's sins. Nothing more. Your northern honor can sniff and find it insufficient. Mine finds it the only bargain worth discussing. Why do you care? Ned asked. Tyrion's eyes flicked away and back. Because they are children, he said, as if annoyed at the obviousness. Because I have a niece who looks at me as if she might like me if her mother permitted it, and a nephew who will never like me and will die for it if someone does not save him from the satisfaction of being right. Because my brother loves a woman the way men love gods and hates himself for it, and I don't know what that makes him, but I know what it makes the rest of us if we let it. Because I am weary of being the cleverest man in rooms full of fools. Pick any reason you like, or pick none. Only give me a word I can take west. Not yet, Ned said. Stannis comes. He always does, Tyrion said dryly. He arrives like a law with legs. Stannis Baratheon came as predicted, his sails plain, his banners clean, his face like a piece of iron hammered flat and hard until it remembered nothing but the blow that made it. With him came Davos Seaworth, a smuggler promoted by gratitude to a lordship in all but name and then by memory of justice to a humility that had not been stripped away by titles. The sea was choppy the morning their ships stood off the river mouth, and gulls screamed their own commentary above the mastheads as if to say that kings were only tall crows in strange plumage. Ned met Stannis at the river gate. Ser Barristan stood with him, and Varys and Peter, and every lord who had sense enough to know that to be seen at the first meeting was to be seen in the first chronicle. Stannis came ashore without hurry and without drama, his jaw set, his eyes cataloging things to be corrected. He bowed to the extent that law required and no more. Lord Stark, he said, I am told you have kept order and kept the truth. I am not a man who forgets debts easily. He glanced up at the Red Keep. Where are my brother's bastards who have sat in my place? In the royal apartments, Ned said, aware of every ear. Guarded, honored, safe. The Queen is with them. Queen, Stannis said, tasting the word with an air of distaste for the flavor. Bring them forth. We will make an end of untruths. Ned did not move. There is an end that has mercy in it. Stannis' eyes flicked to Barristan, then back. I am not cruel, he said. Men have said it because I am not warm, but cruelty is a kind of sloppiness. It offends me. Lord Tyrion Lannister asks to take them west, Ned said. Under assurance of safety. Stannis' mouth tightened. Tyrion Lannister asks for many things. He asked my brother to be less of what he was and failed. He asked his father to be more of what he is and succeeded too well. He will not ask me to spare crimes. He knows me better. They are children, Ned said. They are evidence, Stannis returned. He held Ned's eyes until something softened in them, not out of kindness but out of pressure of other things. Very well. The girl and the younger boy will go to the rock with their uncle, under writ of my seal, under pain of forfeit of lands and life if they are harmed. The older boy, he paused. The pause stretched. I will not have Joffrey in the west to be paraded by his grandsire as a grievance. He will go to Dragonstone to be taught harshly what obedience is and to learn books he should have learned before. He will not be killed while he is obedient. If he attempts to be a king in more than his dreams, he will be corrected. Ned let out a breath he had not known he held. It was not the mercy he would have chosen. It was a mercy hard enough to leave marks. Yet in that hardness was a shape that would not wound for the sake of wounding. I will hold you to your word, he said. Hold me to my word, Stannis replied. Hold every man to his. That is all I ask. They climbed to the throne room together, and it seemed smaller now that the question of who would sit upon the throne had been answered by men in the hall rather than by the chair itself. Cersei stood with her children. Her green gown was immaculate. Her hair caught the light like coins. When Stannis entered, she did not curtsy. She did not bow. She looked at him as a cat looks at a dog that has barged into the yard, with annoyance edged by contempt and sharpened by calculation. So, she said, when the formal words had been said and written and witnessed. Another Baratheon. Another wooden man who calls his lack of imagination justice. Stannis's jaw worked. I will not bandy insult with you in a hall that has heard too many. Your children will go with their uncle. The older boy will go with me. You will choose to accompany which you like. If you remain here, you will be an honored guest with the courtesy due a lady of your rank. If you go to the Rock, you will be a pawn. If you go to Dragonstone, you will be a prisoner. I give you eyes to choose with. Cersei did not look at Joffrey when she answered. I will go west. Joffrey's head jerked. Mother, be quiet, she said, and only then did she put a hand on his shoulder. Your uncle will take you to a cold island where they eat fish and speak gnats for words. I will not. You will learn a little of the silence I tried to teach you and did not. Perhaps you will learn to hear it. She bent, kissed his hair, and turned away before his hands could grasp at her. It would have been hard to say where cruelty ended and love began in her then. Perhaps they lived in the same room in her heart and had never learned the door between. Tyrion took them that afternoon. Tommen wept quietly and was consoled by sugar plums and promises made sincerely and likely to be kept. Myrcella asked if she would see the seabirds she'd heard of and never believed were real, and Tyrion told her yes. There would be birds that skimmed so close their wingtips drew lines in the water. Joffrey went with Stannis like a man walking to a scaffold he refused to admit he saw. He did not curse nor spit. He walked very tall. It was a credit and an indictment both, like so many things about the boy. With the Lannister children removed, peace did not descend like a soft blanket over a child's shoulders. It came in sharp-edged moments where decisions were made and then broken by news from the Riverlands or the Reach. Renley crowned himself at Highgarden with the Tyrells around him like a field of green spears in bloom, and for a breath the realm felt torn in the middle again, pulled between the man who was law and the man who was liked. Catelyn Stark rode to his camp and spoke peace to him and came away with more respect and no victory. Stannis weighed patience against pride and, true to himself, chose neither. He chose the sea. Ned found himself a hinge upon which larger doors turned. He wrote to Robb and told him to hold men ready but not to cross the neck without cause. He wrote to Edmure Tully and told him to pull his men in tight around his lands and not to ride like a fool into the swords of men who laid traps for fools. He sent word to the Vale through Lysa, who did not answer, and he sent word to the Wall through the hand of a steward named Samwell Tarly, whose letter was awkward and honest and spoke of cold things in the woods that did not belong to any of the southern wars. That letter sat in Ned's chest like a stone all the time. He dealt with problems of bread and coin and men who wanted the king's ear and found Stannis's a poor substitute. Sansa walked the gardens with Arya, and sometimes they did not quarrel. The older girl learned quiet without being broken, and the younger learned a new way to bear her fierce temper without setting it too often alight. Syrio took Arya to an empty hall and taught her to listen for an opponent's breath. Septa Mordain tried to teach Sansa to read Stannis's face and found it a poor primer. Ned sat with them in the cool of evening and told them stories of Brandon and Lyanna he had never set to voice before, and the girls learned at last that their father had been a young man once, and that youth leaves a man even if he never leaves it first. Ser Barristan sat in old armor and wrote a history of the kings he had served in short, spare lines that made men weep because of what they did not describe. Varys sent small, sharp letters to places where rats were thick and men were thin. Peter smiled and built a house of counting that men thought they understood and did not. Janos Slynt discovered he had been given more power than he knew what to do with, and that in the end it was less than he had imagined. On a day when the wind out of the east carried a hint of salt, Davos Seaworth stood in the small council chamber and spoke of wildfire. There are casks of it, he said, and his hand traced a map on the table without the map being there. Old and ill-kept. Your pyromancers have been dreaming while their jars have wept. If there is a battle on the river, the stuff will light itself with insult. How much? Ned asked. Enough to cause mischief, Davos said. Enough to make an end that suits a song and not wisdom. If you will have my counsel, my lord, quench it. Quench it now and long before men sail in to die in it. Stannis' eyes flicked. If Renly comes with the Reach, They will stomach wildfire if it punishes their pride. They will also burn the city to skeletons, Davos said, and met the king's eyes with a quick, sure steadiness that was not insolence but the lack of fear of a man who had already paid more dearly to stand in a room like this than most men paid in lifetimes. You will not want that in your song. They went down into the tunnels with torches that hissed and stank. The pyromancers fluttered and protested, more concerned for their parchment names of dragons than for the jars of green hell that sweated evil on the shelves. Ned put his hand to the damp stone and thought of ghosts with cold hands and pale blue eyes and of the heat of wildfire, alive in another way. They quenched the jars they could and buried the rest under rock and seal again, and a hazard passed that no small folk would ever know to thank them for. War came as war always came. Not with cymbals and clarions only, but with miscounts, bad roads, and the knowledge that men had to be fed even when they were about to die. Renley came as far as the Mander with his banners like a moving garden. Stannis held back like a hunter who knows the deer has not yet scented him. Tywin prowled the riverlands like a storm that would not break. Robb Stark kept his men tight in the north and waited with a patience that grew along with him into a man that men would follow. A raven came from the wall and spoke of cold shadows longer than shadows had a right to be, and Ned hid it in his heart again and again, knowing that the South still believed winter was a word in songs. One night Ned dreamed of Winterfell and woke in the Tower of the Hand. He went alone to the godswood, and the moon lay on the pond like mail. The weirwood's red leaves hung perfectly still, and the carved face had the melancholy of old stone. He had given the city a peace measured in days and choices. He had spared children and angered men who thought themselves mountains. He had chosen law when it was heavy and mercy when it was heavier. He had been lucky more than clever and stubborn more than wise. He had not died under the throne's knives. He had not been the spark to a fire that would have left only ash in the hall. He looked up at the face that looked past him and said, "If I was wrong, show me." The wind came late and thin, and smelled of salt from the east and leaf mold from the west and smoke from the south and something keen from the north that made his teeth ache. It moved the leaves at last with a sound like old paper. Ned closed his eyes and stood in it. He felt as if all the stories that had brought him to this place had shifted slightly underfoot and found better purchase. By autumn, the realm had the shape of a hand with 3 fingers extended in 3 directions to strike 3 foes, and a thumb pressed hard to keep the palm from splitting. Stannis's fleet lay like knives in the Blackwater, sharp, orderly, ready. Renly's great host bloomed across the reach and would not commit until it could choose a battle that would look handsome in a tapestry. Tywin's army gnawed at the riverlands and found the meat tougher than expected because the wolf in the north had sharper teeth than rumor had given him. The thumb was Ned Stark's stubbornness, with Ser Barristan's iron bracing it and Varys's threads binding it and Davos's common sense stitching it when it frayed. Cersei wrote letters west that arrived and made men weep and harden by turns. She played at being a captive queen until she learned the rules of that game and discovered it had fewer moves than she had expected. Then she learned a better one. She asked to see Sansa. They met in a sunlit room with thin white curtains and a bowl of pears yellowing on a gold plate. Cersei's dress was simple and flawless. Sansa had left off the bright ribbons she'd once loved and wore a blue that looked like the sky over the godswood on the first clear day after snow. Septa Mordane stood with folded hands. A Lannister maid arranged and rearranged the fruit and listened too hard. "I am told," Cersei said, looking at Sansa and through her both, "that you walked with my daughter in the gardens and did not speak to her about crowns." "I spoke to her about kittens," Sansa said, and a small smile touched her mouth at the corner, which was more courage than 1,000 men sometimes managed. "She misses her own." Cersei's lashes lowered. When they lifted, there was an expression there so fleeting that even the careful maid might have missed it. "I miss mine," she said, and then laughed at herself without mirth. "The elder is not a kitten. He is a wild thing who was allowed to grow without a hand." "He is a boy," Sansa said, and found her own voice odd in her throat. "Sometimes boys are wild. My sister is wild. She is not cruel for it." "Your sister learned wildness from common men," Cersei snapped, and then smoothed the snap into a purr. My son learned it from lords. That makes it worse. Remember that." She stood, and for a moment she seemed to sway as if something had pushed her that had no hand. "You will be a beauty, Sansa Stark. Beauty is a power. Men will tell you it makes you weak. Men are fools. Use it as if it were a kind of knife, but be careful how you draw it. It cuts the wielder more often than the victim." She moved to the window. "If you marry and love and obey, do it for yourself and not because some man tells you how to be a woman. The realm will decide a king today and another tomorrow. You will always have yourself. Do not lose her." It was advice and it was poison, and it was the first thing Cersei had said that did not sound like it had been gold-plated for an audience. Sansa listened with a heart too young to tell the difference and too old not to try. When winter finally showed its edge in cold mornings that made the stone sweat, Renley brought his banners up from the south. The city woke like a beehive invaded by a bear. Stannis' men filed into their places with machine neatness. The gold cloaks attempted to look as if they had been born drilling and not just taught their left from their right last week. Ned walked the walls with Barristan and Davos. He saw what men always saw on the eve of something that would be remembered whether they wished it or not. Mended boots, nicked sword edges, prayer murmurs, the way laughing took on a strained sound in the throat and then fell quiet altogether. Renly's banner with the golden-crowned stag rippled like a river when his vanguard took their place in the fields. He rode to the walls with a dozen bright knights like a plume on his horse's head and called up his greeting as if this were a tourney. He asked to speak to Stannis beneath a flag of truce. Stannis agreed. They met in the halfway space between armies that becomes a stage when kings step upon it. "You could have had me at your side," Renly said, and he did not waste time pretending love he did not feel. "We could have made a realm remember beauty. We will make it remember order," Stannis said. Renly smiled broad and false. "And who will sing of that? Men who live long enough to have grandchildren," Stannis returned. They did not agree. They would never agree. They rode away like two magnets turned to push. The talk among the camps that night grew loud with wagers and insult, and in the dark corners whispers spread like mold. Catelyn Stark appeared in Renly's camp as a ghost from the north, spoke for peace, failed, rode away with dust on her hem. That night, the wind came in fitful gusts that made the torches gutter and the banners crack. Somewhere a singer tuned a lute and then, hearing his audience sober around him, put it away unplayed. At dawn, Renly Baratheon died in his pavilion with no blade in his body and a shadow on the canvas wall that made men cross themselves and then deny what they had seen. His banners took his death into their cloth like a stain. Some tore themselves free and blew apart. Some were caught quickly by men clever enough to change cloaks while the blood was still warm. The Tyrells drew back with abrupt, silky efficiency, their spears turning like wheat in wind away from the fight. Stannis did not cheer. He did not smile. He did not even look satisfied. He looked as a man looks when the world betrays his belief that it will behave sensibly if told often enough to do so. Davos Seaworth found Ned in the old Maester's solar with the window open to a wind that had shifted north. "We will not meet them today," he said. "They are not in any mind to be met. The Reach will be thinking of its gardens, not your walls." "Whose hand was it?" Ned asked, knowing and not knowing. "I have heard men say it was the Red Woman of Ass High," Davos said, his eyes going to the window and the gulls beyond. "I have heard men say it was Stannis himself, except they do not say it where he can hear. I have heard men say many things and found that the ones who speak loudest often have soup on their breath. I am only a smuggler, my lord. I know shadows on the sea, and I know they are not to be chased. I do not know the ones cast by men's souls." Ned thought of Catelyn riding south, of a boy with snow in his hair far to the north on a wall that was not a metaphor, of winter as a real thing moving toward them with patient hands. He thought of all the tidiness he had worked to keep and how easily men kicked it into the ditch once they believed they saw a shorter path. "Then the realm has a king," he said at last. "A single king, named by law and need and mischance." "Aye," Davos said, "and no peace yet that a man can eat with bread." Stannis took the city without a battle to sing about, which made it better for the city and worse for the singers. He did not strip the septs nor the nobles. He hung a handful of men who had committed rapes under Cersei's careless gaze and a handful who had stolen with both hands and called it tax. He did not hang Janos Slint, though many had expected him to. He took Slint's command from him without ceremony and gave it to a rough man who did not know how to flatter but did know how to keep his men from knocking over fruit carts when they were bored. He made Peter Baelish count the same number twice. He made Varys show a map that only Varys had ever looked at whole. He asked Ser Barristan to keep his white cloak and did not ask him for more stories of kings he'd served, which made the old knight grateful in a way that he would not have been had he been pressed to flatter. Ned Stark was named Hand again, formally this time, and the brooch sat on his breast like an old scar that had been made honest. He took it because there was no one else who could take it, and because it felt less like ambition and more like duty in a world where duty had been allowed to become a word no one said without a sigh. He sent for Robb. He sent for Catelyn. He wrote to the wall about grain and men and the need for hard hands and clear eyes. He thought often of Jon Snow, the boy he had not found time to write to kindly enough, and wondered whether that cold wind that came in the mornings now would harden the boy into a weapon or polish him into something brighter. He walked often in the godswood and asked always the same question and heard always the same answer. The wind, the leaves, the water. It was not silence. It was not speech. It was something that pressed gently and made the heart know the shape of its own strength. On a morning of pale sunlight, Arya fought Syrio in the long hall where they had fought since they found a hall long enough and empty enough to teach a girl how to be a smaller, fiercer thing than anyone expected. She moved with delicate fury and broke apart her father's worry with each step. Sansa sat on the steps with a book open and her hair loose and laughed once. Sudden, when Arya did an impractical flourish that made Syrio's pleasure show like a lamp under thin cloth. Ned stood in the doorway and watched them without yet being seen. For a moment the war shrank to its proper size. A thing men did with fear and pride that would never be noble no matter how many noble words you used to dress it. For a moment the realm was a garden with two girls in it, one learning to be a blade and the other learning to be a woman, and both learning to be themselves without asking leave from men with crowns. For a moment, the Iron Throne was a chair in a distant room where other men were thinking too hard about how to sit and not hard enough about how to stand. In that moment, Ned Stark allowed himself a measure of peace with the choices he had made. He knew winter would come, and with it would come new oaths and old enemies and truths that would make the tidy justice he had helped to build look poor and small. The north was full of dark water and older stories. The wall whispered. The far woods had eyes. He had put one war in order. There would be others that did not submit, but he had not let a lie sit a throne. He had not let a queen turn children into armor. He had not let the realm's law become a jest. He had paid for that with sleepless nights, with the knowledge of mercies that would be knives in other men's mouths, with bargains that smelled of fish and iron and something like compromise. It would have to be enough. Ser Barristan found him in the godswood again a week later, when the leaves had gone from red to a darker shade like drying blood. "Lord Hand," he said in the old style, which men had stopped using when they wanted to flatter and had begun using again when they wanted to be plain. "It is a rare thing to serve a king who does not delight in foolishness. I could grow used to it, but the realm grows restless when it is not fed a story it understands. They will make one for themselves if they are not given one. We might want to choose which myth we prefer." "Is that our task now?" Ned asked. "To lie more cleanly than the others? To tell the truth with better music?" Barristan said. "Let them sing that we brought the law back into the hall. Let them sing that we spared children and punished men who thought themselves too clever. Let them sing that winter came and found us not surprised. That is a song I can bear to hear." They stood together, two old men who had not felt old until very recently, and listened to the water. In the west, Tyrion wrote a letter that said that Myrcella liked the seabirds and Tommen had learned to sit a pony without falling entirely off, and that Joffrey had read a chapter of a book without throwing it at a servant's head, and that this counted as a small and important victory. It said that Tywin was thinking instead of striking, which meant the blow would be larger when it came and perhaps clumsier. It said that the rock had many cold rooms that remembered things. It said that mercy had complicated everything in the most useful way. It said, between the lines and in the space where only the careful saw, that he thanked Ned Stark for being difficult to buy. Ned read it with a care he rarely gave letters. He folded it and put it away and went back to counting grain and speaking to lords and deciding which wrongs to correct publicly and which to leave to men's conscience. He did not flatter himself that he had saved the realm. He had not even saved his own family from all pains, only from some that would have torn flesh. But in the account of what one man might do with the day given him, he had settled his balance enough that when winter came he would not be running, he would be standing. Days shortened. The air took on the clean, cruel taste of the season that taught men who they really were. The first pale snow fell in the Kingswood and melted before noon. Men watched it with the fascination of city folk who tell each other stories about weather as if it were a visiting noble. The second snow came a week later and stayed until midday. The third remained until dusk. The fourth drew thin white lines along the edges of rooftops. Small birds left tracks like writing on the stoneway that no one could read. One evening, while the kitchens were laying out trenchers and the halls were filling with talk that tried hard not to be tense, Arya climbed to the topmost bit of the eastern tower and looked out where the river met the bay. She saw 3 ships moving like black stitches on a dark cloth and wondered what messages they bore, what stories they would thread through the city, what names they would carry away. Sansa joined her and shivered and smiled, and they did not quarrel. Their father's shadow was long across the courtyard below and steady where it lay, as if shadows could teach men something about standing. The Iron Throne sat in its hall, all absurdity and menace, half sculpture and half threat. It had been made by a man who thought power was a thing you could sit upon if you were only willing to bleed in order to rest. Men came to it daily and made speeches to it and found, if they were honest, that it never spoke back. The realm moved around it with a life of its own, carried by law and custom and the stubbornness of those who believed that truth was not merely what the loudest man said. In the north, wolves lifted their heads and scented a cold older than memory. On the wall, boys became men or ghosts. In the cities, bakers learned new prices. In the fields, peasants looked up at banners and saw weather. In the castle, by the river, a man who had sworn never to bow to a lie had spoken out loud in a room made for fear, and fear had not won. It would return. It always did. There would be other rooms, other choices, other days when the line held and other nights when it didn't. For now, the line held. The day closed cleanly. Somewhere, a singer began tuning again, and this time he did not put the lute away. He tried a line and then another, and the notes climbed. He was not a great singer. He would not be remembered. Still, the song he made fit the evening. It did not flinch from the hard parts, and it made something like sense of men who had not meant to be brave and were. The melody did what truth does when it is given time enough. It found its form. And in the godswood, where the red leaves had begun to fall and lay like sunset on the ground, a lord of winter listened without quite listening and felt, for the first time in a while, that the world might be held together by something sturdier than custom and more decent than fear.